Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 78A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie. This week's Torah portion, we are at the end of Genesis.
Awesome.
Bereshit is going out the door and we're coming into Shemot, which is Exodus next week. So this week, basically we have the closing of Genesis. Oh, I'm sorry. It's from Genesis 47:29 to the end of 50. We have the death of Jacob, and actually it begins with the preparation of the death of Jacob. And I thought we would touch on that real quick, and then we'll move through some of the highlights that we didn't necessarily touch on last year. At the end of 47, we see where Jacob is called for Joseph to come. He wants him to promise him that he's going to return to the land. And if you think about this, if you remember in 46, the Lord in 46:5, the Lord says, listen, go on down. I'm going to let Joseph close your eyes, and then I'm going to return you to the land. So he knows this is going to happen. He knows that Joseph will be the one who's there when he dies. So he goes straight to Joseph.
And the one with authority
to make sure it gets done. To make sure
he goes back into the land.
Yes, and he makes him do the promise. We talked about that last year where he has to put his hand under the thigh. Because he wants to put Joseph in a position that when he presents it to Pharaoh, he really can't really get out of it. Gotcha. You know, he can't be persuaded to just let him stay. Now, there is a cultural event happening that we easily miss. The land, let's think about Egypt. You have the Pharaoh, who's considered to be a god of Egypt, right?
Right.
So he's buried in Egypt because he belongs to the land. You have the god of the land there, all right? Joseph, to the Pharaoh, is seen as a mighty man. Remember when they met, he's like, wow, how old are you? And I mean, he was quite enamored with who this man is.
Jacob was?
Jacob, right.
Okay.
So, understanding that, he understands the God and land together. To him, Jacob is a representation of the Hebrew God. Therefore, he belongs in the land of Israel. Right, or Hebrews, it was not Israel yet. Well, it is his land, but you know, he belongs he needs to be buried in his land because that's the God over there. So when we see in chapter 50 where they're taking him to, they're going to take him into the land, into Canaan, to be buried. But if you notice, first, Jacob's body goes through the being embalmed.
Okay.
And that takes a 40-day process, which the numbers make you start thinking. Then, for 70 days.
70,
okay. 70 is like for the nations, okay? Right, because they're celebrating the fact that this father, Jacob, gave them Joseph, who saved them. Hello.
Wow, hello, yeah.
Well, then,
Yeshua.
Joseph, and then Joseph does a 7-day once they get into the land. So when they bring them into the land, Joseph's like, this is what we do. Right. We do a 7-day of mourning. Now remember, he's embalmed. He's going to be preserved.
Right.
Because they've got to get there. I mean, it's going to be a long event.
A travel.
Right. He stink by the time you got him there. Okay. So they embalm him. They allow it to be done to be preserved. And he's preserved and his body is brought in. But when they go into the land, into Israel, they cross over the Jordan. Now let's think. The Jordan ends in the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
So if you're coming up from Egypt and you're going in, that doesn't make sense.
No, they go.
Why wouldn't you just go straight up?
There had to be a reason.
They go all the way around, and the area, threshing floor of Atah, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but anyway, is considered to be, you ready for this?
Yes.
Near Jericho.
Wow. So it's just like Israel the nation.
Yes. So as the Father did, because if you remember,
40
Messiah
days
only does what the Father did.
Yes, yeah.
He only does what the Father did. And Messiah had 40 days in the wilderness, right? So you've got these 40, 70, and 7 numbers, and they're coming into the land. The same way Israel will come into the land.
You know, I just had a thought. I bet, we say that when the Lord walked with Adam and Eve, right, that he was in the Jerusalem area and Eden was east, right? So before they fell, maybe that's how they would get to the Lord, And so each time Israel comes into the nation that way, maybe it's kind of foreshadowing like you'll go back to this point.
Well, you'd be coming from the east going to the
Well, yeah.
Oh, I
going
know,
across
I
the
know,
Jordan.
I know. Oh my gosh! And the Holy of Holies is the west side of the temple.
Right. So I'm just thinking that the reason, or not the reason, but that's how it was originally done.
Right.
And so each time is to say, and they probably knew. Okay, let's say if that were true, they would know that.
Yeah.
Right.
We have that in our book.
So each time it's done, So each time it's done, it's saying, "Oh, yes, this is how our forefathers did it." Meaning the beginning, Adam and Eve did it.
And when Messiah
man
comes,
and female,
where does he come?
From Basra,
which
from
is
the Jordan area,
from the east, coming over into the land.
Yeah,
because that's what the Father did.
And I would imagine when He gathers us, it might be to that point, and then we go in. I mean, who knows?
Well, yeah, that makes sense. If in Revelation 12 you've got the woman who's out in the wilderness, she's going to come back in, coming that direction.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
So
just
right here in Genesis,
it's like a weird thought.
Yeah. But it makes your gears get going, right? And like we've said before, look, if you want to know Revelation, learn Genesis.
Right.
I mean, those patterns are there. Well, here's one of them. Look at the direction in which they're coming.
Right.
Up by the Jordan, over by Jericho, which is exactly where Israel comes in. We also have the interesting fact that Joseph and Jacob were both embalmed.
Okay.
So we have Jacob's embalmed. Of course, he's got to be able to get there, like we said earlier. He's got to be able to get into land, so he has to be embalmed. He's preserved. Joseph is preserved. However, he's preserved for an entire generation. So when they go back to get him, right, when Moses goes back, he's just a sack of bones. But, so we have these bones, all right? Mm-hmm. We have these bones, and they are able to be carried off.
They're dry.
They're dry bones, that's right. Because we go with Ezekiel.
Right.
See, he was so preserved. Listen, he was so preserved that he was held as a god. See, they didn't want to let him go because Joseph was seen as a god of Egypt. Mm-hmm. So they didn't want to let him go.
Right.
But we needed the generation that no longer knew him. It wasn't going to be an issue to take that god out of this land. It didn't matter.
Oh.
So once we hit that age...
I'm seeing. My wheels got it.
So
I'm
we
going.
literally, not just did they have to have one who no longer knew who Joseph was, it was so that, the slavery and everything could happen, but also they don't care that you're taking.
He was a god. So when Egypt, the world, took hold of Joseph, they made him a Egyptian-looking god, right?
Right.
But the last generation to go into the land, or to leave Egypt, didn't see him that way. He was just their brother.
Yes. He was a fellow Jew. He was, he was...
Whose place was not in Egypt anymore.
Correct. And it's time to move it.
I see the pattern.
And the world side, they no longer had any... They didn't even recognize him for who he was.
Right.
There was no longer any need for him. So go ahead and take him. Well, isn't that, on the bigger scale, a lot of what's happened to Yeshua?
Yes.
Really who he is, that they have no need for that.
He was made into the worldly God-looking thing.
Right, and now they just want the worldly God aspect. They don't want that other stuff. So go ahead and take him. We don't care if you take that Yeshua.
Right.
Fine. They're going to take him on that grand exodus, which is the process in which I think we are actually in.
Yes.
Another part of that process that we're in. Let's look at chapter 48, where we see the adopting, the bringing in of Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, we talked a lot about it last year, but I wanted to go at a little different angle. So, he's adopting these two children. Now, remember, they're in their 20s. He's adopting these two young men, I should say.
Right.
All right. We have the father, Jacob, adopting the son, children, and bring them on under his authority to be his kids. Well, we see this with Yeshua. We see this in Galatians 4:5 and Ephesians 1:5, where the father is adopting the children through Messiah, right? Under Messiah. So he's taking those and bringing them into his. Just like we couldn't be birthed without Messiah.
Right.
So once we are birthed through Messiah, we're then brought in and adopted as full heirs into the kingdom. So we're not equal to Messiah, but on that whole heir part, we're brothers and sisters with him, right?
Right.
Now, think about all the tribes of 12. When Ephraim and Manasseh are brought in, they go under Joseph. So Joseph isn't really counted because they represent him. But Levi is then taken out as far as having land inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
See, in 49, where we see the giving of the blessing, this is the blessing. This is not the birthright. Joseph goes first in 48 to receive the blessing of the firstborn. He takes his 2 sons. You notice they're alone?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't this what happened with Jacob, with his dad?
Right.
Going in alone, right?
Right.
To get the blessing, to get the birthright. Okay? He's called in. He's doing just what Jacob did. Jacob understands this. He knows what's going on. He can't see, just like his dad. However, he allows the Spirit to lead him, right? He's like this, and then he crosses over.
Right.
Because again, he understands when he crosses over that right side, that one who's going to really bring in all the nations, Ephraim, through the adoption, okay? Mm-hmm. He had to be the one that was considered above Manasseh in the adoption process. In my head, I'm like, well, so does that show the greater and the least in the kingdom? Mm-hmm. Both are adopted in, but the greater have a bigger role.
Right.
Than the least.
What I was thinking is, we're all adopted, us as the Gentiles,
right,
coming in, and we're going to fit in under one of them. We're either going to be likened to Manasseh or likened to Ephraim.
Right. Yeah. That
same thing. Yeah. Greater and least.
And I just made me think of this. So just like Ephraim and Manasseh couldn't be adopted in until they were birthed by Joseph, right? Mm-hmm. Well, until Messiah died, the northern kingdom couldn't come in anyway. Right. So he literally had to go through that process of adopting them after Messiah, because there was no way. It was like it was impossible for them to even been born, to been brought back in. It was impossible for them to be brought back in before Messiah. Right. Just like without Joseph, couldn't. Now, there's an interesting verse in 48:6, and it says, it's Jacob speaking to Joseph. He says, your offspring whom you shall bring forth after these are yours, and let them be called by the name of their brothers and their inheritance. So he's saying, okay, basically I'm taking Ephraim and Manasseh.
Right.
And whoever you have born after that is yours.
Is yours. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, remember with Judah, we had that? Yes. Where Tamar had the 2. The first one for the son who needed the heir, and then the next one was for Judah. Okay. Right. Well, here we have where Joseph is being told, whatever you have next is yours. But when you go through in Numbers 26 and look at all those who came out of Egypt, there's no one else under Joseph except for the children listed under Ephraim and Manasseh.
So he didn't have any kids that came out after that.
Not that he gave birth to.
Wow. Okay.
But so here's the thing. There could have been something else. There could have been some other children that were adopted per se, if it was done just like Joseph had done with Ephraim and Manasseh. We only get that hint from in chapter 50, verse 23. It says, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the 3rd generation. Here's the generation idea. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, was also born upon Joseph's knee. Now, if you remember in chapter 28, where Joseph is presenting his 2 sons, he says that he brought them from between his knees.
Right.
Yet here, these children in 50:23 are born upon his knee. It's possible that meant that he adopted
all of them.
Well, or at least some of them. Because the truth is, he says also born upon Joseph's knee. So also would make you think, oh, well, someone else was too. Okay. Last thing to mention for this week's Torah portion is that when they came back from burying Jacob, the brothers were what? They were scared. They went up and said, hey, Dad said that before he died, that after he died, we needed to tell you or ask you to please not be mean to us, to not be mad with us, not, right? Begs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Joseph weeps. Yeah. He's heartbroken. He's like, his whole thing is, did you think I only did that before as a joke? I mean, let's realize that the first recorded act of forgiveness ever in the Bible is, by man, people, is with Joseph forgiving the brothers. That's the first act. Well, let's go back to, as we know, as in Ephesians, it talks about Ephesians 1, that even before the foundations of the earth,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't that be the first act of forgiveness?
Yes.
Of Messiah knowing what he's going to go through
Yeah.
before he went into the physical state, already forgiving his brothers, or
Yes.
else he could not have gone through the whole thing.
Right. Right.
So literally, that's representing what the very first act of forgiveness was even before.
Yeah.
And again, this is brother to brother, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's a great pattern.
Yeah, it is a very strong pattern. Another aspect of this was, see, the brothers realized, wow, I bet we were only being forgiven and taken care of because of Dad.
Right.
Just because he loved Dad. Because remember, who did he keep asking about? Benjamin and Dad. Is your father still alive? Is your
Right.
father still alive?
Right.
And then when he finds out, hey, guys, I'm your brother, is our father still alive? That's what he wants to know.
Yeah.
And it's Jacob's spirit that's revived, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is so core to the, I guess, the bringing together, okay, of the family. The father's love is what did it.
Right.
Now the father's gone, and they're like, ooh.
Ooh, he's going to turn on us now.
Yes, they understand that none of it was for his merit, for their merit. It wasn't anything they did. Actually, it was the opposite of what they did, right? It had to be for Dad. So think about that for us, okay? It's not on our merit. It's on Messiah's merit
Right.
that the Father forgives. But Messiah has to forgive the brothers too.
Right.
Why? Because of the love of the Father.
Right.
Because he loves the Father so much, he did what he did to forgive us. How many times have we found ourselves already repentant, forgive, and then going constantly, oh, I'm sorry, did you forgive me? Oh, did you forgive me?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you didn't forgive me. And doubting that we were even saved. Doubting that he died for our sins. Maybe somebody else's, but not mine.
Right.
In a way, we're doing the exact same thing that they're
the brothers.
doing. Yeah. Going up and saying, well, you did it for some other reason. Not because you really love me, but because of another reason.
Right.
But we've got to take a hold of, no. He also, he forgave because he loved us.
Right.
Well, that's all I've got this week. I hope that you have a marvelous week. We look forward to seeing you on the flip side with Julie and the Prophets. Shalom!
Dogs. Let the dogs out.
Ooh, 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 ooh.
That'd be Cam and Ju. Lee.
They're running amok. There's a whole bunch
Yeah,
of them.
they are.